My name is Serenity Peterson, and I am 30 years old. I teach high school English in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I pour my heart into helping students find their voices. Last month, I walked into my father's birthday dinner carrying a homemade cake and a bottle of wine, hoping just once my family might see me for who I really am. Instead, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We wish we didn't have to deal with you." My father nodded, his face calm, like it meant nothing. Those words burned deeper than any argument we had ever had. My whole life, I had been the invisible one, overshadowed by my older brother Garrett, the golden child with the corner office and perfect life. I had stayed silent, endured the comparisons, waited for recognition. But that night, something inside me finally broke. I stood up, stared them down, and said, "Perfect. Don't call me when you need help." Then I walked out, my heart pounding, knowing it was over. 1 week later, my phone lit up with 35 missed calls from Dad and a desperate text from Mom, "Please." Growing up in Fort Wayne, our middle-class life looked picture-perfect from the outside. Nice house, annual vacations, Sunday dinners. But beneath it all, I was always the odd one out. Garrett, 4 years older, was the star. A lawyer with a sleek office downtown, he had just bought a modern house and landed a major promotion. My parents could not stop bragging. Thomas, my father, retired from his bank job 3 years ago, would beam every time Garrett's name came up. Linda, my mother, who manages a local retail store, would chime in, praising his work ethic, his success, his everything. Me, I was just Serenity, the high school English teacher helping kids navigate Shakespeare and their own struggles. I loved my job, but to my parents, it was not ambitious enough. For years, I tried to win their approval. 2 years ago, I lent Linda $2,500 when her car broke down, no questions asked. I organized Thomas's retirement party last year, spending $650 of my own money on catering. I was the one who showed up, who held things together. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. At every family gathering, they would steer the conversation back to Garrett's achievements. If I mentioned a student I had helped, like the girl who was failing but graduated because of my support, Linda would nod politely, then say, "That is nice, but Garrett just closed a huge case." Thomas would agree, adding, "He is really making a name for himself." The dismissal stung every time, but I kept showing up, thinking maybe one day they would notice. That evening, I sat at the dining table in my parents' Fort Wayne home, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. Thomas's birthday dinner was in full swing, the table crowded with relatives and a few of his old colleagues. Garrett held court as always, leaning back in his chair, grinning as Linda gushed about his latest promotion. "He is running the entire litigation department now," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "And that house of his, 3 bedrooms, chef's kitchen, just stunning." Thomas raised his glass, his smile wide. To Garrett, making us proud. Everyone cheered, and I forced a smile, my fork poking at my plate. Ashley, Garrett's wife, sat beside him, beaming like she had won the lottery. I had heard it all before, the endless praise for his achievements. But I thought tonight might be different. I had had a tough week at school, but also a win. One of my students, a quiet girl named Lily, had been struggling with severe anxiety, missing weeks of class. I had spent months talking her through it, connecting her with resources, helping her catch up. She had just told me she was back on track, even thinking about college. It felt like a victory worth sharing. When the table quieted for a moment, I took a deep breath and spoke up. "I had a good week, too," I said, looking around. "One of my students was in a really rough place, but I helped her work through a crisis. She is doing so much better now, even planning for her future." The words barely left my mouth before Linda cut in. "That is sweet, Serenity," she said, her tone flat, like she was humoring a child. "But teaching is such a simple job, isn't it? Have you thought about doing something more substantial, like Garrett? Maybe go back to school, get a real career." The table went silent. Thomas looked down at his plate, not saying a word. Garrett smirked, swirling his wine glass. Ashley glanced at me, then away, like she had not heard. My cheeks burned, but I tried again. "It is not simple," I said, my voice tighter. "This girl was falling apart. I spent hours helping her, and now she has a real shot at college. That matters." Linda waved her hand, dismissing me. "That is nice, but let us be realistic. Garrett is out there winning cases, building equity. You should aim higher, Serenity. You are 30 now. When are you going to do something real?" I gripped my napkin, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream that teaching was not lesser, that helping a kid like Lily mattered more than any courtroom win. But the words stuck in my throat. Thomas finally looked up, but only to say, "She has a point, Serenity. You could be doing more." Garrett leaned forward, his voice smug. "Teaching is fine for some people, but it is not exactly changing the world, is it?" Ashley giggled softly, covering her mouth. The relatives murmured, some nodding, others avoiding my eyes. I felt like I was shrinking, my efforts reduced to nothing. The conversation shifted back to Garrett, his new car, his next big trial. I sat there, barely touching my food, the chatter blurring into noise. Linda laughed at one of Garrett's jokes, her eyes sparkling, while Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. I was just a guest at their table, not their daughter. Every word they said about Garrett felt like a knife, reminding me I would never measure up. I kept my head down, trying to hold it together, but inside I was boiling. I had come to this dinner hoping for a moment of recognition, thinking maybe my news about Lily would finally make them see me. But all I got was the same script. Garrett is the star, and I am the disappointment. The weight of it pressed down on me, and I realized this was not just about tonight. This was my entire life, played out over one meal. I set my fork down, my hands trembling, and braced myself for what was coming next. The dessert plates were cleared, and the mood at the table shifted. Linda set down her wine glass, her expression turning serious. "We need to talk about something important," she said, glancing at Thomas. The relatives fell silent, their eyes darting between my parents and Garrett. I sat stiffly, still stinging from Linda's earlier dismissal of my work, my stomach twisted. I had never heard them talk like this at a family dinner. Thomas folded his hands, his voice measured. "Your mother and I have been thinking about the future," he said. "The house, our savings, the estate. We want to make sure everything is handled properly." Linda nodded, her gaze landing on Garrett. "We have worked hard for what we have, and we want it to go to the right person. Someone responsible." Garrett sat up straighter, his chest puffing out. Ashley squeezed his arm, her smile widening. "It makes sense for Garrett to handle most of it," Linda continued, her voice warm as she looked at him. "He has built a stable life, a real career. He is someone we can count on." Thomas added, "We are planning to leave the house to you, Garrett. You have got a family to think about, a future to build. It is only fair." I blinked, trying to process. The house where I had grown up, where I had spent summers reading on the porch, was being handed to Garrett like I did not exist. I opened my mouth to speak, but Linda kept going. "You have always been the one who steps up," she said to Garrett. "Not everyone in this family pulls their weight." Her eyes flicked to me for a brief second, then back to him. The words hit me like a slap. I felt my face flush, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The table went quiet. Linda raised an eyebrow, her expression cool. "Oh, Serenity, do not make a scene," she said. "You know what I mean. Your teaching job, it is fine for what it is, but it is not like you are building anything real. You are more of a burden than a help." The room seemed to tilt. A burden. I had lent her $2,500. I had spent $650 on Thomas's retirement party. I had organized their events, shown up when they needed me, and this was what I got. My father did not look at me, just sipped his coffee like nothing had happened. Garrett leaned back, his lips twitching in what looked like amusement. Ashley stared at her plate, silent. I could not stay quiet. "A burden?" I said, my voice shaking. "I have been there for you every time you needed me. I have given everything, and you call me that?" Linda sighed, like I was being difficult. "Serenity, let us be honest," she said. "Garrett has made something of himself. You are just there. We wish we did not have to deal with you." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Thomas nodded slowly, his face calm, like he agreed completely. The relatives shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Garrett's smirk widened. Ashley glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You are wrong," I said, my voice low but steady. "I have given you more than you deserve." My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to keep going. "When your car broke down, Linda, who lent you $2,500 without hesitation?" "Me." "When you needed someone to plan your retirement party, Thomas, who spent weeks organizing it and paid for half the catering out of pocket?" "Me." "And you call me a burden?" Linda rolled her eyes. "Do not be so dramatic, Serenity," she snapped. "We have done plenty for you. You are acting like we owe you something. Garrett chuckled, muttering, always making it about herself. I looked around the table, at the faces that would not meet my eyes, at the family that had just written me off. My whole life, I had tried to prove I was enough. But in that moment, I saw the truth. They would never see me. Thomas's nod, Linda's words, they were not just cruel, they were final. I grabbed my purse, my voice rising. You want to know what is dramatic? I said. Spending years trying to earn the love of people who will never give it. I am done. Linda stood, her face flushing. Where do you think you are going? She demanded. You are being childish. Garrett leaned forward, his tone mocking. Yeah, Serenity, where are you going to go? You need us. I stared at him, then at my parents, and felt something shift inside me. No, I do not, I said. You need me. And you just lost me. Thomas finally spoke, his voice tight. Serenity, sit down. Let us talk about this like adults. But I was already moving toward the door. There is nothing to talk about, I said. You made your choice. I am making mine. Linda called after me, her voice sharp. You are going to regret this. You will come crawling back. I stopped at the doorway, my hand on the frame, and turned to look at them one last time. I will not, I said. And when you need help, when things fall apart, do not call me. I am done being your backup plan. I walked out, the cool night air hitting me as the door clicked shut behind me. My heart pounded, my hands shaking as I climbed into my car. I wanted to scream, to cry, to drive back and tell them exactly what I thought of them, but I did not. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, and let the weight of it all sink in. I had just walked away from my family. The people who were supposed to love me had called me a burden, and I had finally said enough. Driving home to my small apartment, I felt the sting of their words, but also something else. Relief. I was not going back to that table, to that life of begging for scraps of their approval. I was done. As I pulled into my parking lot, the streetlights casting long shadows, I made a promise to myself. I was going to live for me now, not them. The future was mine to build, and they were not going to be part of it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in years. I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee growing cold, and stared at my phone. 35 missed calls from Thomas, 12 from Linda, 3 voicemails I had not listened to. A text from Linda simply read, "Please." I set the phone down, my jaw tight. They did not get to pull me back after calling me a burden, after years of dismissing everything I did. I was done. I called my best friend Irene, a fellow teacher who had known my family's dynamics for years. I walked out, I told her, my voice steady. I told them I was done, and I meant it. There was a pause, then Irene's voice came through, firm and clear. Good. You should have done it years ago. They have been using you, Serenity. Her words grounded me, reminding me I was not overreacting. I had spent a decade trying to earn their approval, and it was time to stop. That afternoon, I went to my phone provider and changed my number. The process felt strange, like I was erasing a part of my life, but also freeing. I set up a new email address, something clean and separate from anything my family could access. I did not tell them. Let them figure it out, I thought. I blocked their old numbers on every platform, cutting the digital ties that had bound me to their expectations. By evening, I felt lighter, like I had shed a weight I had carried for too long. My apartment, small and cluttered with books, became my sanctuary. I spent the weekend organizing, throwing out old family photos that only reminded me of being invisible. I kept one picture of myself at my college graduation, standing alone. No family in sight because they had skipped it for Garrett's law school ceremony. That photo stayed on my desk, a reminder of how long this had been going on. I was not going to let them define me anymore. The following Monday, I threw myself into work. Teaching had always been my anchor, the one place where I felt valued. One of my students, Jamal, had been struggling in my English class, his grades slipping because he was too shy to participate. I started staying after school with him, helping him analyze poetry, watching his confidence grow with every discussion. When he got his first B on a quiz, his smile was wide, and I felt a surge of pride. This was what mattered. Not my parents' approval, but the difference I made in these kids' lives. I also leaned on Irene more than I had in years. We met at a local cafe, our usual spot, and she listened as I unpacked everything. They called you a burden? She said, her voice rising. After everything you have done for them? Serenity, you are better off without them. I nodded, sipping my latte, and for the first time, I believed her. Irene had always been the friend who saw through the nonsense, who told me the truth even when it hurt. Now, her support felt like a lifeline. 3 weeks after the dinner, I joined a book club that Martha, another teacher at my school, had been inviting me to for months. I had always said no, too busy with family obligations. But now, I had time. The group met every Tuesday at a cozy Fort Wayne library, and that first night, I felt nervous walking in. Martha greeted me with a hug, introducing me to the others, and we dove into discussing a novel I had read in college. For the first time in weeks, I laughed, sharing my thoughts without fear of being dismissed. The book club became a sanctuary. We talked about everything, from the characters' motivations to our own lives. One woman, a retired teacher named Carol, shared how she had cut off her own toxic family years ago. "It was the best decision I ever made," she said, her voice steady. "You will find your people, the ones who see you." Her words stuck with me, a reminder that I was not alone in this. These women, strangers just weeks ago, were becoming the support system I had always craved. I also started volunteering at a community center, something I had wanted to do for years but never had time for. The coordinator, a coach named Roger, showed me around the first day, his voice warm and grounded. "We need people like you," he said, gesturing to the teens gathered in the main hall, "someone who actually cares." I signed up to mentor students, helping them with homework and just listening when they needed to talk. One girl, Mia, reminded me of myself, quiet and eager to please. I started working with her on writing, watching her light up when her essays improved. Roger and I began chatting during breaks, bonding over our shared love for helping kids. He was kind, with a quiet confidence that felt different from the arrogance I had grown up with in Garrett. One afternoon, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee after a session. I hesitated, then said yes. We sat at a small cafe near the center, talking about our work, our lives. He told me about his own family struggles, how he had walked away from a father who never believed in him. "It is hard," he said, "but you learn to build your own family, the ones who choose you back." As weeks turned into 2 months, my life took on a new rhythm. I woke up without the dread of family obligations. I spent my evenings grading papers or meeting with Irene and the book club. Weekends were for volunteering, where Roger and I grew closer, his presence steady and comforting. I was not running from my past, I was building over it, brick by brick. My students, my friends, my new routines, they were mine, built on my terms. One evening, Irene and I sat on my couch, a bottle of wine between us. "You seem different," she said, studying me. "Lighter." I nodded, realizing she was right. The weight of my parents' judgment, of Garrett's shadow, was fading. I was not invisible anymore. I was seen by people who mattered, people who valued me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. "That is because I am free," I said, and Irene clinked her glass against mine. 3 months after the dinner, I checked my old email one last time, curious. There were messages from Linda, pleading, "Serenity, please talk to us. This is ridiculous." One from Thomas, brief and cold. "You are being selfish." Even one from Ashley, Garrett's wife, her tone falsely sweet. "We miss you. Let us work this out." I read them, felt a flicker of something, maybe sadness, but not regret. I closed the account, my finger steady on the delete button, and did not look back. My life was moving forward. I had my students, who reminded me every day why I loved teaching. I had Irene, Martha, and the book club, who gave me laughter and connection. I had Roger, whose quiet support was growing into something more, something I was not ready to name yet but felt deeply. I had built a life that was mine, free from the shadow of my family's expectations, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt whole. But the past, as I would soon learn, had a way of coming back. 8 months after I walked out of that dinner, my life felt steady. I was sitting in my apartment one Tuesday evening, grading essays, when an email pinged on my phone. It was from Ashley, Garrett's wife, sent to my new address. The subject line read, "We need to talk." My stomach sank. I had not spoken to anyone in my family since I changed my number. How did she get my email? I opened the message, my hands tense. "Serenity, I know you blocked us, but I got your email from Irene's LinkedIn profile where you were tagged in a teaching event. Please do not be mad. We are desperate. Garrett has been charged with embezzling client funds, $380,000 from his firm's trust accounts. It is all over the Fort Wayne news. Your parents sold their house to cover legal fees and debts. We are broke, living in a cramped rental, and Ashley and I are facing eviction. Can we stay with you? Just for a little while? We have nowhere else to go." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. Garrett, the golden child, had fallen. The man my parents had called reliable, the one they had planned to leave everything to, was a criminal. I felt a flicker of vindication, but it was quickly drowned out by something heavier. They had chosen him over me, and now their world was collapsing. Ashley's email was not an apology. It was a demand, as if I owed them a lifeline after everything they had done. I set my phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the Fort Wayne skyline. Part of me wanted to help. They were my family, after all. But another part, the part that had spent 8 months rebuilding, reminded me of Linda's words. "We wish we did not have to deal with you." I took a deep breath and sat back down at my laptop. I needed to think this through, not react out of guilt or old habits. The next morning I called Irene before school. "Ashley emailed me," I said, my voice strained. "Garrett embezzled hundreds of thousands. They are broke and want to stay with me." There was a long pause, then Irene's voice came through, sharp and clear. "Serenity, do not even think about it. They called you a burden. They wrote you off. This is not your mess to clean up." Her words hit hard, grounding me. I knew she was right, but the pull of family, even a toxic one, was strong. That evening, I sat with Roger at the community center after a mentoring session. He had become more than a friend over the past months, his quiet support turning into something deeper. I told him about the email, about Garrett's charges, about my parents selling their house. He listened, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Not what you think you should do. What do you actually want?" I paused, the question cutting through my confusion. "I do not want to let them back in," I admitted. "But I feel guilty." Roger nodded, his hand covering mine. "Guilt is not a reason to sacrifice yourself," he said. "You have built something good here. Do not let them tear it down." His words stayed with me as I drove home that night. I thought about the life I had created, the students I was helping, the friends who saw my worth. I thought about Mia, the girl I was mentoring, who had just finished a short story she was proud of. I thought about the book club, where I had laughed harder than I had in years. This was my life now, and I was not going to let my family's crisis destroy it. The next day, I drafted a response to Ashley. I kept it short, my tone firm. "Ashley, I am sorry you are in this situation. I recommend contacting a bankruptcy attorney. There are several good ones in Fort Wayne who can help you navigate this. I cannot offer more than that. Take care." I read it over 3 times, my finger hovering over the send button. Part of me wanted to add something softer, to leave the door open, but I remembered Thomas nodding when Linda called me a burden. I remembered Garrett's smirk. I hit send and closed my laptop. Ashley replied within an hour, her tone frantic. "Serenity, please. We are family. You cannot just abandon us like this. Your parents are devastated. They made a mistake, but they need you." I read the message, felt the familiar tug of obligation, and then I thought about the 8 months I had spent without them, the peace I had found. I deleted the email without responding and blocked Ashley's address. I was not going to let them guilt me back into their dysfunction. Over the next week, I learned more about Garrett's situation through a mutual acquaintance. He had been skimming money from client accounts for over 2 years, funding his lifestyle, the new house, the car, the vacations my parents had bragged about. The law firm had discovered the discrepancies during an audit, and Garrett had confessed under pressure. He was facing 4 years in prison, his law license revoked. Thomas and Linda had liquidated their savings and sold their house to pay restitution, but it was not enough. They were living in a small apartment, their retirement dreams shattered. I felt a pang of sadness hearing this, but it was distant, like watching a tragedy unfold for strangers. They had built their lives around Garrett's success, and now they were paying the price. I had not caused this. I had not embezzled money or lied to clients. Their downfall was not my responsibility. I called Irene that night, needing to talk. "They are really struggling," I said. "Part of me feels bad." Irene's voice was gentle but firm. "You are allowed to feel bad," she said. "But feeling bad does not mean you have to fix it. You tried for years to earn their love, and they threw it back in your face. This is their consequence, not yours." I leaned on my support system more than ever. Martha invited me to a poetry reading, where we listened to local writers share their work. Roger and I went hiking on a Saturday, the trail winding through the Indiana woods. the air crisp and clear. He held my hand as we walked, his presence a quiet reminder that I was not alone. At school, Jamal asked me to help him prepare for a speech competition. Watching him stand in front of the class, his voice steady and confident, filled me with pride. This was my life. These were my people. 2 weeks after Ashley's email, Thomas called my old number, the one I had disconnected. He left a voicemail that was forwarded to me by my provider. "Serenity, this is your father. We made mistakes, but you are still our daughter. We need you. Please call us back." I listened to the message once, heard the desperation in his voice, and deleted it. I was not their safety net anymore. I was done being the one who held everything together while they tore me apart. I had chosen myself, and I was not going back. 15 months after I walked out of that dinner, I stood in front of my principal's office, my heart pounding with nervous excitement. The interview for head of the English department had been rigorous: 3 rounds of meetings, a presentation on curriculum reform, and peer evaluations. When Principal Davis called me in that morning, I knew this was the moment. "Serenity," she said, her smile warm. "The board unanimously chose you. Congratulations. You have earned this." I walked back to my classroom, the title still sinking in. Head of the English department. It was not just a promotion. It was validation that my work mattered, that the years I had poured into teaching were recognized. I thought about Linda's voice at that dinner. "Teaching is such a simple job. Have you thought about doing something real?" I smiled to myself. This was real, more real than anything my family had ever valued. My students were the first to celebrate with me. When I announced it in class, they erupted in cheers. Jamal, the shy boy I had tutored, stood up and started clapping, his grin wide. "You deserve it, Miss Peterson," he said. "You changed my life." His words hit me hard, a reminder of why I had stayed in this profession despite my family's dismissal. These kids saw me. They valued what I did. That was enough. That evening, Irene insisted on taking me out to celebrate. We met at our favorite Fort Wayne diner, the one we had been going to since we started teaching together 5 years ago. Roger joined us, his presence now a constant in my life. Over the past months, what had started as friendship had deepened into something more. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I am so proud of you," he said, his voice steady. "You have built something incredible." The book club threw me a small party the following Tuesday. Martha brought champagne, and Carol, the retired teacher, toasted to my success. "You are proof that walking away from toxicity leads to greatness," she said, her eyes warm. I raised my glass, surrounded by women who had become my chosen family. This was what belonging felt like. Not earned through sacrifice or silence, but given freely because they saw my worth. At the community center, Mia, the teen I had been mentoring, showed me her latest short story. It had been accepted into a local youth writing anthology. I read her name in print and felt tears prick my eyes. "You did this," she said, hugging me tightly. "You believed in me when no one else did." I thought about all the times I had tried to make my parents see me, to make them believe in me. But I had found my purpose here, in these moments with kids like Mia, who reminded me that impact was not measured by approval but by change. My life had taken on a fullness I had never known. Roger and I had started officially dating 3 months ago, taking things slow but steady. He understood my past, never pushed, and showed up in ways that mattered. We spent weekends hiking, evenings at the center mentoring kids, and quiet nights at my apartment talking about everything and nothing. One Saturday, as we sat on my couch, he looked at me seriously. "You know you are incredible, right?" he said. I smiled, feeling the truth of it for the first time in my life. I heard updates about my family through a distant cousin who still kept in touch. Garrett was 2 years into his 4-year sentence, his reputation destroyed. Thomas and Linda were barely getting by in their small rental, their savings gone, their retirement plans shattered. Ashley had moved in with her sister in another state, filing for divorce. The cousin said Linda asked about me sometimes, wondering how I was doing. But she never reached out directly, and I was grateful for that. The door I had closed was staying closed. One evening, as I sat grading papers in my apartment, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 15 months ago, I had been the invisible daughter, desperate for scraps of approval from people who would never give it. I had been called a burden, dismissed, erased. But walking away had not destroyed me. It had freed me. I had built a life filled with students who looked up to me, friends who valued me, and a man who saw me for who I truly was. The biggest lesson was not about proving them wrong. It was about choosing myself every single day. I chose to surround myself with people who uplifted me. I chose my students, who reminded me that my work changed lives. I chose teaching, not because it was prestigious, but because it was meaningful. I chose Roger, who showed me what healthy love looked like. And I chose to let go of the people who had only ever made me feel small. My family's downfall was not something I celebrated, but it was not my burden to carry either. They had made their choices, building their lives around Garrett's success, dismissing my contributions, calling me useless. Now they were living with the consequences. I had spent years trying to earn their love, sacrificing my time, my money, my peace, but love should not require that. Real family, the kind I had found with Irene, Martha, Roger, and my students, did not come with conditions. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sat on my apartment balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the Fort Wayne skyline wake up. My phone buzzed with a message from Jamal. "Miss Peterson, I got into college. Thank you for everything." I smiled, my chest warm. This was my legacy. Not a house or an inheritance, but lives changed, students empowered, a community built on respect and care. Roger stopped by later that afternoon, bringing takeout and his easy smile. We ate on the couch, talking about the week ahead. He mentioned a hiking trip he wanted to plan, and I agreed, excited for another adventure. As he left that evening, he kissed my forehead and said, "You are the strongest person I know." I watched him go, feeling a peace I had fought hard to find. My life was not perfect, but it was mine, built on my terms, filled with people who chose me, who saw my worth without me having to beg for it. I thought about the girl who had walked into that birthday dinner, hoping her family would finally see her. She had been broken that night, called a burden, told she was not enough. But she had walked out, and in doing so she had found herself. I was not that desperate girl anymore. I was Serenity Peterson, head of the English department, mentor, friend, partner. I was enough. I had always been enough, and I did not need their approval to know it. That's Serenity's story. A 30-year-old high school teacher who spent her entire life being dismissed by her family, who lent her mother $2,500 and spent $650 on her father's retirement party without a single thank you, who helped students turn their lives around but was told teaching was not a real career, who was called a burden at her father's birthday dinner while her parents announced they were leaving everything to her golden child brother, who walked out and built a life so meaningful that she became head of her English department while her brother went to prison for embezzling $380,000. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. I love seeing how far Serenity's story has reached and connecting with people around the world who understand what it means to be overlooked by family. Hit that like button if this story hit home for you. Share it if you have ever been the family member who does everything but gets no credit, the one who is only remembered when they need money or help organizing events. And subscribe for more true stories about people who chose themselves over toxic families and never looked back. And here is my final question for you. 8 months after cutting contact, Serenity's family begged for help because her brother's crimes destroyed them financially. She said no and recommended a bankruptcy lawyer instead. Do you think she was right to refuse? Or should she have helped them despite everything they did? Let me know what you think. Because sometimes the hardest part of setting boundaries is knowing when compassion becomes self-destruction. Thanks for watching. Remember, you do not have to keep sacrificing yourself for people who see you as a burden. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away and never looking back. See you in the next one.